everybody, this is Aubin recording from my home in Ashburton, Devon, and this is another in my series of short videos related to the COVID-19 lockdown, and this one is about managing grief, sorrows and depression. So I'm speaking to you today using my past professional experience as a psychiatrist and as a psychotherapist, and I'm going to be talking to you about some of the understandable feelings that we'll all be having, but also I hope to give you some very practical tips for managing feelings where sadness is at the core, for the protection of your mental health really, so that we can all emerge from this in a stronger way. So we're already 4 weeks into lockdown and we don't know how much longer we're going to have to isolate, and some of the lucky amongst us might be coping very well and some are even thriving, but for many people being stuck indoors in isolation is bringing up a lot of difficult feelings. And this is going to be a particular problem for any of us that have had periods of loneliness, prolonged grief or depression in the past, but actually we're all having to face potential losses at this time. Loss of freedom, loss of income, loss of contact with other people, and loss of our dreams for the future. So it's completely understandable that feelings to do with sadness are coming up for the vast majority of us. And as a former psychiatrist, I'm really keen that we try and do everything we can to avoid a secondary pandemic, that of mental health problems. In Britain, we've got a very high number of people that live alone, and also our stiff upper lip, national identity can be very unhelpful to us at times like this, because the more painful we're finding things, for many of us it's the last time we would reach out and try to talk to somebody or ask for help or support. If people fall into depression, we know that their experience of pain, whether that be physical or emotional, is going to be more intense. We also know that people who are depressed really find it a struggle in relationships and can either regress into snappiness or into silence. And finally, depression is also known to increase the risk of some physical health problems and indeed to weaken our immune systems. So anything that we can do to avoid falling into depression is bound to be good for us and for those that we live with. Now, if we can find a way of rising above depressing thoughts and feelings, we could become much healthier on a long-term basis and emerge from this as stronger, better, more authentic human beings, and that would be a really great thing to aim for. So I hope this video will be helpful to anyone listening, or it might be useful to someone that you know. And I'd also like to refer you to 2 of the other videos in this series: When Being on Your Own is Your Greatest Fear, and also Managing Difficult Emotions, which has got other practical tips in it. So, while we're on our own and we've got a lot of time, we tend to distract ourselves from difficult feelings by doing things like tidying up or finding things on our to-do list that we can cross off. But as we run out of things to do and we're increasingly isolated, difficult feelings have a habit of bubbling up, even if we've tried to really bury things very deeply. Now, I don't believe that we can ignore difficult feelings or that we can turn them into something positive. First of all, we have to really be with them and examine them and understand them, get to the depths of them. And this period of isolation is also an opportunity of retreat when we can do that. Also, if we try to turn every negative emotion into a positive one, or every negative thought into a positive one, it's impossible to do, so we just end up feeling like a failure, and that's the last thing we need at this time. So, this could be thought of as a wonderful retreat, an opportunity to get into our feelings, and this is what some Buddhists call inviting our demons to dinner. And what that means is actually welcoming difficult thoughts and feelings as they pop up and kind of getting to know them a bit better. And let's face it, even if we do find some things which we thought are demons, like difficult, painful emotions or things about ourselves that we previously haven't liked very much, at least we're on our own. We can scream or weep, and there's nobody here to see us or hear us if that's what we care about. If we're brave enough to release these previously feared feelings and thoughts about ourselves and the world, it actually releases a tremendous amount of power from our subconscious, and we end up feeling much more alive, much more vital, and we'll be able to emerge into the world as more balanced human beings with a lot more confidence. So in a previous video, I described this ability to rise above your feelings so that you can look at them and get to know them as surfing on sewage. So what you want to do is ride the board and possibly really be exhilarated by the ride, but not end up falling into the mess where it's difficult to get out again. So let's have a think about this process. So I think the first thing to do, if you want to, or you're brave enough to get to know what's going on for you inside, your shadow side, some therapists call it, it's a good idea to get into the practice of being able to really self-soothe and calm yourself. And this can be as simple as allocating a place in your house, perhaps with a candle or a photograph of somewhere where you've always felt relaxed, where you can just sit comfortably, both feet on the floor, and just breathe really slowly. When we're anxious about things, we tend to breathe from a very shallow place high up in our chest, but if you think about awaking from a peaceful sleep, you'll have been breathing from a very deep place in your belly. So if you can spend a few minutes, a couple of times a day, really breathing from the belly, slowly and deeply, you'll find that this switches off the stress chemicals, and it means you're in a calmer place where you're more tolerant of any difficult thoughts that come up. Some people like to imagine that they're breathing from their heart and opening up their heart to good energies and light. Other people like to focus on that picture of where they've always felt relaxed, and some people actually imagine breathing in healing and peace and calm, and breathing out any stress that they're carrying. And talking about stress, we hold it in our bodies, so as you breathe deeply, it's a really good idea to feel in your body where there's a sensation. Pay attention to it. Try and breathe into it to relax it, but also ask what it's telling you. So if you find that your jaw is very tight, maybe there are things that you want to say to someone else or to yourself, or you just want to shout and scream. If you find that your fist is clenched tightly, perhaps there's a bit of you that wishes it could punch something. So just notice where these bodily sensations are locking in feelings, because they'll need to be released as well. Now, once you've begun to recognise the feelings that you are carrying, the next step is to try and strengthen the part of you that can simply observe rather than falling into the emotional sewage. So, as I've said, some people like the image of being a surfer riding the waves. A nice simple one is to imagine that you're getting into a lift or onto an escalator, and that you're going up several floors in a building to a balcony where you can look down on the crowd of emotions and thoughts below. And some people like to imagine that they're climbing up a beautiful mountain path, and at the top of the mountain they're going to find a wise being who dwells in a cave, and that wise being may have counsel for us about how to understand and manage our difficult feelings and thoughts. And they'll certainly be there to sort of hold us and contain us while we're with them in our imagination. So just try these, try them all, and when you find one that works for you, you'll be ready to move on to the next step. So this video is going to focus on sad feelings. And we may notice, first of all, that as we breathe deeply, that we feel a bit tearful, or in our bodies we might feel that we're holding a general heaviness, or a specific area of our body might feel tight and closed. So, for example, if we've lost a loved one, we can erect unconsciously concrete walls around our heart through fear of loving and therefore being hurt again. So just notice where the feelings of sadness are, and if you feel completely paralysed in your body, just keep breathing deeply and try to relax as many muscles in your body as possible. And if you feel that you need to release some of the heaviness or sadness, it's okay to cry. You're in a space on your own if that would normally worry you. If you feel yourself sobbing out loud, or you want to make moans or sounds, what's to stop you doing it? It's about releasing some of the sorrow so that you're more expansive and are better able to deal with anything else that comes up for you over the coming weeks and months. You may notice that you're having particular thoughts as you go into the feelings. So for example, it might be, I'm incredibly sad about people who are in hospital alone and can't be comforted while they're ill. Or I feel really sad that I can't see my grandchildren and I'm missing somebody's birthday. Or it could be that I'm really sad about being on my own and I'm getting fed up of it. So just notice what the thoughts are that are associated with the feelings. And if you're one of the people that's chosen to do the breathing exercise by going up the mountain to see a wise being, does that wise being have anything to say to you? Whether words of comfort, or challenging the negative thoughts, or some other words of wisdom. Now, in one of my previous videos, Managing Difficult Emotions, I talked about grief and the stages of grief that people are said to go through. So grief isn't just about sadness and depression, it can also be about going into shock and denial. So some people are coping with this coronavirus by denying the severity if one catches it or passes it on to someone else. Another stage that we're said to go through is anger. So we might find ourselves being much more irritable, grumpy, or even furious about ourselves, people in our lives, or the world in general. Another stage is said to be bargaining, where we're sort of making pacts with God, even if we don't normally even speak to God or believe in God. You know, if I do this, will you make this happen for me? So all of this is completely normal. But there also tends to be something else going on, which is even if we're in grief, or even if we're anticipating grief because of losses that are still to come, not only will we be cycling through these difficult stages like a dance backwards and forwards, but there will also be a part of us, a survival mechanism, which is making us carry on and making us see the positives. So a key thing is to try and strengthen that part. So if after a month already you're fed up of being in isolation, you're lonely, you're starting to feel bitter about it, See if every day you can find one thing to be grateful for. And it might be something like, oh my goodness, I noticed that that pack of rice was about to go out of date and I've actually used it up. That's great. Or it could be, I'm getting more phone calls from people that don't normally ring me. Or I was feeling pretty rough, but I actually rang up a friend of mine and they were great speaking to me. So it's even worth making notes of this, making notes of the things that you are realising about where your body holds feelings, notes about where you feel your emotions are blocked, what the emotions are really about, what thoughts lie behind them, and also any of these positive strategies that you find yourself able to adopt. Now, obviously, grief and sorrow and sadness are bad enough, but it's when they spiral down into depression that it becomes a real problem. So any of us that have been depressed tend to describe it as either a black weight pressing down on us or as falling into a pit from which we can't find a way out. So some of the imagery techniques I've suggested, focusing on a beautiful place, a photograph of a place where you feel calm and relaxed, or going up in a lift, or up a mountain so that you're above your emotions and thoughts, these can help us to stay on the rim of the pit rather than falling down. Now, one of the things that happens when someone becomes depressed is that their thinking pattern changes. So they start to have thoughts about themselves which are negative, like, I'm a bad person, I should have tried harder, it's no wonder so-and-so doesn't ring me, I never bothered to phone them, I deserve what I'm getting, etc. We also tend to have negative thoughts about the people around us. So they tut when I try to say that I'm feeling miserable. Why don't they pay me more attention? They don't really care about me. And then it can go back to negative thoughts about yourself. So I don't deserve them anyway. I'm a miserable person. Of course they're going to walk away. And the other thing that happens is we start to think negatively about the future. So as you can imagine, in depression, we just get a sense of hopelessness, and that can really suck the life out of us. So anything we can do to not sink into that abyss or to take a step out of it when we're depressed is very helpful. So some of the things that are important are, first of all, not to allow the paralysis to set in. So cognitive behaviour therapists recommend for people who are depressed something called behavioural activation. And what it means is making yourself do things every day, even if you don't really feel as if you've got the motivation or energy to do it. So having a set time by which time you'll be out of bed. Yes, you will clean your teeth in the morning and have a wash. Yes, you will get dressed and not sit in your pyjamas all day. This sort of thing. And maybe setting a task, it might only be small, which feels manageable for that day. I'm going to sort out the top drawer in my bedroom, for example. Or, okay, I'm going to phone my brother today. So set manageable tasks, and you might also like to keep a note in your journal of what you're achieving, because it's really motivating when you look back over a week's entries and you notice that you are doing more day by day, and the more you do, the less depressed you'll feel, because you'll get a sense of achievement. It's also very well known that if we can get out into nature, this is really helpful. So take your daily allowed walk, take that short drive you're allowed to take to exercise, get out in your garden, or bring the outside indoors by treating yourself to a bunch of flowers or to some lovely fresh vegetables. So doing something positive every day is a really good step in terms of avoiding depression. But the other thing that you can do is start to challenge some of the negative thoughts. So, let's just say that you've got this cycle of thoughts that I'm a bad person, I don't deserve to have other people contact me, other people hate me, and that's going to carry on in the future. So see if you can challenge those bad thoughts. Are you really a bad person? So remind yourself of the many times in your life when you've done something good. Remind yourself of the times when you have felt worthy, and make a note of them so that if you fall into that place again, you can go back there. And if you have the thought, other people hate me, ask, is that really true? You know, when Jim phoned the other day, he sounded really pleased to be talking to me. Or I had 10 cards on my birthday that show that people are thinking about me positively. And is it really hopeless? Have a think about anything that's happening around you, things that you're seeing on Facebook that are positive, things that you know that are happening in your local community. In fact, a lot of people believe that this crisis should give us a lot more hope for the future because communities are pulling together strongly, we're doing more for other people, we're feeling much more connected. People are beginning to think about different ways of living in the future, where they shop locally to support local businesses, where they get their food without so many food miles. People are looking forward to the things that they're going to do in the future, and they're now very simple. They're things like, I'm going to have my family over for dinner. I'm going to give 3 people hugs. So focus on these things that are emerging that are really positive from this crisis. Now, in all of this, don't forget to look after your body. So try and have a regular time to sleep. Make sure you're staying well hydrated and eat the most vital food, most alive food that you can. Lovely fresh produce. Take care of yourself, self-nurture. You know, use up those pots of cream that you were given for Christmas that you never had time to apply before. Whatever you need to do, self-nurture and look after your body as well as looking after your mind. So, I hope that some of these ideas will be helpful if you're feeling grief or sorrow at this time. And if you're unfortunate enough to have fallen into deep depression, there are lots of self-help resources out there. Just have a look on the NHS website or Google self-help for depression. And if you need an assessment, doctors are still working, as are nurses, even if most of the consultations are by telephone. So make sure you reach out to someone. The telephone numbers for helplines are being well publicised, so from everything to the domestic abuse helpline to the Samaritans. So reach out and call someone, a professional, if you're finding that reaching out to friends and loved ones isn't enough, or if it feels too scary because you don't want to burden people. There is help out there. So I hope you found this helpful. If you or someone you know is not really feeling overwhelmed by feelings of sadness, but more of anxiety and fear, the next video in this series will be about managing anxieties. So perhaps I'll see some of you again, and thanks very much for watching, and have a bright day. Thanks.